I turned 90 this year. 90? Huh. Kind of hard to believe, honestly. And at this age, people don't really talk to you anymore. They study you. Young entrepreneurs come up to be asking for shortcuts. Interviewers keep wanting the secret. Investors want predictions, forecasts, all that stuff. And everybody thinks there's some magical formula out there that explains wealth in one sentence. But wealth isn't one sentence. It's decades of decisions, decades of habits, decades of understanding things most people ignore until it's too late. And I'll tell you right now, the biggest financial advantage I ever had wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck either. It was understanding how the world actually works while everyone else was distracted. I made my first $1 million at 15 years old. Real money, not internet clout money, not fake net worth tied to borrowed lifestyles. Actual money generated from ownership and leverage. And before you romanticize that too much, let me tell you something. Becoming rich young changes you. It separates you from ordinary life very quickly. People stop seeing you and start seeing what you can provide. Your value becomes attached to numbers. Your identity becomes tied to performance. But back then, I didn't care about any of that. I was obsessed with winning. I grew up poor enough to understand what financial insecurity does to people. It changes the way they speak, the way they sleep, the way they think. My father used to stare silently at unpaid bills like they were death sentences. My mother stretched every dollar until it screamed. I promised myself very young that money would never control me the way it controlled them. So while other boys played games, I studied business. Not because I was gifted, because I was scared. Fear is an incredible motivator when properly directed. At 12, I was buying damaged radios and repairing them. At 13, I realized repairing them myself was limiting my growth. So I hired 2 older teenagers to do repairs while I focused on sourcing inventory and making deals. That was my first real lesson in leverage. And listen carefully, because this is where most people fail financially. Wealth is built through leverage, not labor alone. Ordinary people trade hours for dollars forever. Wealthy people learn how to multiply effort through systems, people, technology, and ownership. That's why the internet changed everything. Most people still don't understand what happened over the last 20 years. The internet created the greatest wealth-building opportunity in human history. Never before could one individual reach millions of people instantly from a laptop. Never before could a teenager build a global business from a bedroom. And yet most people use this incredible tool to entertain themselves into mediocrity. That's the tragedy. You have access to more information than any generation in history. Yet people are mentally weaker, financially weaker, and more distracted than ever before. They consume all day instead of creating. The internet rewards creators, builders, educators, marketers, entertainers, innovators. The average person uses it like a digital pacifier. And while they scroll, somebody else builds an empire. That's the part billionaires understand that ordinary people don't. Attention is currency now. Influence is currency now. Distribution is currency now. If I were 20 years old today, I'd become obsessed with solving modern problems through scalable systems. Artificial intelligence, software, media, education, health technology, digital infrastructure. Money flows where society is heading, not where it has been. That's exactly what people like Elon Musk understood. The public sees personality and controversy. Wealthy people see positioning. Elon didn't just build companies, he attached himself to industries that shape the future. Payments, electric vehicles, space infrastructure, artificial intelligence, energy. Every billionaire understands one thing: ordinary people ignore. The future pays more than the present, and most fortunes are built while everyone else is still doubting the opportunity. When I invested heavily into technology decades ago, people called it risky. When I bought shares during crashes, people called it reckless. When I acquired struggling businesses everyone abandoned, people called me insane. The wealthy are often willing to look foolish temporarily to become free permanently. Ordinary people seek comfort. Wealthy people seek asymmetrical opportunity. That's another phrase you should remember. Asymmetrical opportunity. Small downside, massive upside. A stock investment can only go to zero, but it can multiply 10 times, 50 times, even 100 times. A business can fail, but one successful company can change your bloodline forever. That's why the rich invest aggressively, while everyone else saves passively. And please understand, I'm not saying saving money is bad. Saving creates stability. But saving alone rarely creates wealth anymore, because inflation quietly destroys idle cash every year. Rich people know this. That's why wealthy families own assets instead of stacking cash in bank accounts. Stocks, real estate, private businesses, intellectual property, energy, infrastructure. Assets generate income whether you work or not. That's freedom. The average person works for money. The wealthy make money work for them. I learned this early because I studied people obsessively. I noticed that rich people thought differently about purchases. Poor people asked, "Can I afford this payment?" Rich people asked, "Will this produce more income?" Completely different mindset. And no, billionaires don't want ordinary people understanding this too clearly. Consumerism keeps economies moving. Debt keeps people trapped. Financial ignorance keeps people dependent. Schools teach obedience beautifully. They teach almost nothing about ownership, investing, taxes, leverage, negotiation, or cash flow. That isn't accidental. Financial literacy creates independence. Independent people become difficult to control. By 18, I was already investing heavily into stocks. Not trading emotionally like gamblers pretending to be investors. Investing systematically. Buying ownership in productive companies. That's another thing people misunderstand. A stock is not just a number on a screen. It's ownership in a business. When you buy shares of a great company, you participate in the growth of human progress itself. That's why Warren Buffett became one of the richest men in history. Patience, discipline, long-term thinking. Buffett understood compounding better than almost anyone alive. Compounding is the closest thing to magic you'll ever see in finance. Small investments made consistently over decades become fortunes. Tiny, disciplined decisions repeated long enough become extraordinary outcomes. But most people sabotage compounding because they need instant gratification. The expensive car now, the luxury apartment now, the vacation now, the designer lifestyle now. And social media made this problem catastrophic. You're constantly exposed to artificial lifestyles designed to trigger insecurity. Young people compare themselves to influencers renting private jets for photo shoots. They go into debt trying to appear wealthy before they've built any actual wealth. Looking rich is one of the fastest ways to stay poor. When I was younger, I drove modest cars while owning businesses worth millions. People underestimated me constantly. That became an advantage. Quiet wealth compounds better than loud wealth. And let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most people don't actually want freedom. They want comfort. Freedom requires responsibility, delayed gratification, emotional control, long-term thinking. Most people abandon those principles the moment life becomes uncomfortable. That's why discipline matters more than motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline compounds. By 30 years old, your habits begin owning you. By 40, they define your financial reality. By 50, changing them becomes brutally difficult. I watched brilliant people stay broke because they lacked emotional discipline. Intelligence alone means very little financially. Emotional control matters more. The ability to avoid impulsive decisions matters more. Some of the wealthiest people I ever met were emotionally calm during chaos. Markets crashed. They bought more. Businesses struggled. They adapted. Everyone panicked. They stayed patient. Ordinary people react emotionally. Wealthy people respond strategically. And yes, I made terrible mistakes too. Massive ones. I became addicted to expansion. Every year had to be bigger. More companies, more acquisitions, more properties. I convinced myself I was building security when I was actually feeding insecurity. Money became scoreboard psychology. No amount ever felt like enough because I tied my identity to growth itself. That's dangerous. I missed years with my children because I believed providing financially was the same as being present emotionally. It isn't. Not even close. I missed vacations, missed ordinary dinners, missed moments that seem insignificant until you're old enough to realize those moments were life itself. That's the irony of ambition. You sacrifice your present trying to secure your future, then one day realize you never learned how to enjoy either. At 90 years old, luxury doesn't impress me anymore. Peace impresses me. Health impresses me. Freedom impresses me. Time impresses me. The richest people I know aren't the loudest, they're the calmest. They own their time. They sleep peacefully. They aren't chasing validation through consumption. That's what wealth should do. It should reduce suffering, not increase ego. So yes, build wealth aggressively. Learn investing, learn business, learn technology. Use the internet intelligently. Own assets, buy stocks, study markets, solve meaningful problems. But don't become so obsessed with making a living that you forget to build a life. At 90 years old, I can promise you this. Eventually, you stop measuring wealth by numbers. You measure it by freedom, by health, by time, by relationships, by peace of mind. I made my first million at 15. I made billions afterward. But if I could go back, I'd understand earlier that enough is a real number. And once you discover that, you become truly rich.